Hi, I'm Mike Bush.
I'm Paul New.
And I'm Colleen Sterling. Welcome to Ask the A&Ps from AOPA.
This is the show. Is it a show? Well, this is the show where we take your toughest maintenance questions and we do our very best to answer them. So if you have a question, email us at podcasts@aopa.org to get on the show.
Make sure and follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you'd like to get on our email list for our monthly newsletter and lots of other good stuff, easiest way to do that is to text the word savvy, SAVVY, to 33777, and your phone will ask you for your name and email address, and it'll automatically put you on our mailing list. So text savvy, SAVVY, to 33777 to put yourself on the list.
So we're just recording this in early January, and I don't know if you guys were following this recent crash at Haneda, Japan, between an Airbus A350, a Japan Airlines Airbus that was landing, and a Dash 8 that was a Coast Guard airplane that was on the runway. Really horrific pictures. The
videos are amazing.
Oh yeah, they had surveillance video of you couldn't really tell who hit who, but you saw the fireball and then the Airbus sliding down the runway. Looks like the nose gear collapsed. The amazing thing is there's over 300 people on that Airbus, and they all got out with 12 injuries, which I'm not surprised,
going down the slides.
Grandmothers and handicapped people jumping down the slides. Yeah. But it's just unbelievable that all those people got out of that plane. It's a real tribute to the back end crew, who are not there to serve you drinks. They're there to keep you safe.
Get you
in
off.
Emergency.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the news commentators yesterday commented that they evacuated the airplane in like 90 seconds. And but that's the certification. If I remember right, when they build an airplane like a Airbus A380 with 2 decks and the whole bit, no matter the size of the airplane, they have to be able to evacuate it. I think it's 90 seconds. I could be wrong. Wow. But I remember back in my airline days, it's like once every 18 months, we had to actually do this process. And we had a Hawker Siddeley 748. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's like a Convair 44 passenger turboprop. And so it would always be this big party because almost all of the Air Illinois employees would come and show up because we had to get 44 people in this airplane.
They serve pizza afterwards.
And more. But anyway, because this would always happen in the middle of the night. And I think the oldest person at the company, other than a handful of the most senior people, were like 25. The whole maintenance department was 25 or younger. Anyway, so they would, and the slides, they'd oil them down so you could actually slide down the slides. And people were in their swimsuits and everything else. And the FAA would be there to make sure we could actually evacuate this airplane in 90 seconds. And it was always a hoot.
Was this like an ATC error that the two airplanes were on the runway?
Blame yet, but it looks like the airplane was cleared to taxi down to the runway, and it taxied out onto the runway. But again, it's very preliminary. I'm getting all this from my ATP husband, who drinks this stuff 24/7. But he also said something interesting. So imagine this: the nose gear collapses, the airplane's the Airbus sliding down the runway like a big, not a tail dragger, opposite of tail dragger.
Nose dragger.
Nose dragger. And then they stop, and the emergency chutes pop out, and the ones in the front are pretty shallow because the nose is close to the ground, right? So you don't slide very fast.
Very steep.
The ones in the back are really steep, and probably people got hurt going out the back. The other interesting thing that he said was that one of the engines on one side was not shut down.
Yeah, the right one. It kept running.
Yeah, which I don't know why. The cockpit crew should have shut it down. Maybe they couldn't. I don't know. But the back end crew had the presence of mind to not open those doors and send people out, because there are chutes that go in front of the wing. and that could have been horrible. I mean, if you remember the San Francisco crash, it was a Singapore Airlines or something,
Right.
where everybody got out of the airplane, but then people were run over in the dark by emergency responders.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this happened at night, and nobody was hurt on the ramp.
Yeah.
That I've heard of.
Well,
So
The only injuries were I think all but one of the crew in the Coast Guard airplane were killed,
yeah,
and one is seriously injured.
the pilot
The pilot,
survived.
Yeah. But it's amazing. I think it's 376 people.
Yeah,
That's a huge
and I
amount
saw
of
a
people.
video.
and the airplane burned.
Oh, yeah.
Completely, it's gone. So that's another interesting thing.
You
These
think it burned
composite-
because the engine wasn't shut down, or
No,
what do
because
you
the
think?
wing got broached and the fuel went all over.
Now
So
there's
luckily,
fuel everywhere.
It was within Japan flight, so it didn't have a lot of fuel, and it was landing, not taking off. Usually that's worse, but still there was a lot of fuel. That was what caused the fireball.
It was a huge fireball. It was
And
amazing.
that, contrary to popular belief, that composite stuff burns pretty darn well. So
Yeah.
the whole thing was consumed, and it took them a long time to put the fire out, which is a data point for Boeing and Airbus on these all composite airframes. They do burn.
Be a lot of studies on that.
But it sounds like maybe it was a slow start to the burn. There was a lot of smoke in the back end. There's video from passengers, milling about, gathering their suitcases.
Yeah. Instead of leaving everything behind.
But I mean, it must have been a pretty organized evacuation. I mean, those guys, that back end crew, they're heroes getting those people out.
Absolutely.
It's
I hate
amazing they got
flying
everybody
airlines.
far enough away from the airplane before it caught fire. Huh?
Yeah, it's just amazing. So that was a Christmas gift. I mean, I'm really sad for the Dash 8 crew. That's very sad. They were flying supplies to the tsunami and
To the tsunami,
earthquake
yeah.
victims.
And what happened to the Dash 8?
It's gone. I mean,
Yeah.
it was smashed up. I don't know specifically, but it took a pretty hard hit. So could have been a lot worse.
Yep.
Collisions on the ground are never landing, takeoff collisions, never very pretty.
Very high energy impact. Our first question is from Chris, who's trying to turn up the heat. How are you doing, Chris?
Doing great.
Good to have you on the show.
Yes, thanks. Hello, and thanks for taking my question. I guess I'll just read off my question again.
Sure.
We have a 2003 Super Decathlon, and it's really cool, and that's the problem.
Yes, it is.
So we actually have a hard time getting the oil temperatures up to 165 or 180 degrees Fahrenheit in cruise. The CHTs tend to run from 270 to 325 degrees. I know others might be really jealous of this problem, but this seems really cool to us. The oil temperatures seem to hover in the 150 degree range a lot. And in the Georgia winters, we cover the oil cooler with some aluminum tape. We took the tape off for the summer, but we still had the low temperatures. So I'm thinking about putting it back on. And I understand that it's ideal to get the oil up to 165 to 180 to boil off the water in the oil. We just had the engine rebuilt 2 years ago because the camshaft was worn due to corrosion on the inside of the engine. And we don't ever want to have to do that again, of course.
Yeah.
We do see a large delta between the different cylinders. We have a Electronics International gauge and shows us the EGT and CHT. You can click over and see one at a time. And sometimes it gives a warning that there's a big delta between the different cylinders. But a lot of times you'll have one that's 270 and one that's 325. And I don't know if that's a problem, but our mechanic doesn't seem to be too worried about any of this. And then
You didn't have to pay for the camshaft.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the oil temperature gauge didn't seem all that responsive, but in this last annual we did in November, they took it out and put it in boiling water to test it, and that seemed to clean it off, and it seems to be slightly more responsive and move around a little bit more. So
But
some of
did
the
they
questions,
did they do that to clean it off, or just to verify that it was reading
Yeah.
the proper
Just to-
temperature?
we were just wondering if the numbers we were seeing were real.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of it cleaning it
Yeah,
off
that-
would make
well-
it work better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just one theory. I don't know if it
Yeah.
cleaned oil out of the inside or some varnish on the outside. Don't know, but that was just a
Hopefully.
theory.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, is there any way to know if the vernitherm is working properly? And so we have, it's a Lycoming AEIO 360 H1B. Don't know that it runs this cool for everybody else, but it does for us. And like our mechanic said to me, is like, well, see that Cessna over there? Look at the size of the, cooling intakes on the front of your
Yep.
cowling. They're like this, and the Cessna is like this, and
Yep.
that's running a 180 horsepower engine too. And I don't know if that was just done for low speed aerobatics or something, or just old school design. So he thinks maybe that's why we're getting a large differential and just overly cooled.
But you can't change that because you're talking certified airplane. You can't really change the size of the holes in the cowling, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I
They
think
weren't
they are
planning
there
to do that.
because, yeah,
They-
I mean,
they-
that engine on that airframe needs a lot of cooling
Mhm.
just because
It's
it's
slow.
going to do a lot of high power,
Yeah.
low airspeed operations.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
let's a couple of different things to focus on. Let's first of all focus on the oil temperature problem, and it's actually worse than what you said, Chris, because where we really want to see the oil temperature is somewhere between 180 and 200.
Yeah.
165 is way too low, it is certainly permissible to block off part of the oil cooler if that's what it takes. You can check the vernitherm, right, by
Doing the same thing you did with the oil
putting
temperature
it
sensor.
in water and watching when the little wax capsule expands and pushes the poppet out. Also, with the vernitherm out, you can inspect the cone, the poppet, and the seat to make sure that they look like they're making good contact. But if the oil temperature is running too low, the vernitherm should be wide open and be bypassing as much oil as it possibly can. So it sounds like maybe you just have more oil cooling than what's needed, and I would probably experiment by blocking off the oil cooler until you can get the temperatures where necessary. The temperature gauge is reading the oil at the coolest part of the cycle, typically right after it exits the oil cooler, and the oil will heat up typically by about 40 degrees as it goes through the engine and hits hot things like the bottoms of pistons and so on. And so the object of the game is that whatever the oil temperature gauge reads plus about 40 degrees Fahrenheit should be above the boiling point of water. And of course,
Okay,
the
that makes
boiling
sense.
point of water depends on what altitude you're at. So if you fly up at high altitudes, then lower oil temperature is acceptable because the boiling point of water is lower. But if you're flying down low, which you most likely are in the decathlon, then you want the oil temperature to be
So that's why the bottom
hopefully
of that
at
range is
180 or so or more.
So I have two clarifications on what you were saying. So this is aerobatic, so it's an inverted oil system.
Mhm.
But the way the oil goes through the inverted oil system, and maybe it doesn't even do it in normal, horizontal flight, but would that system affect the temperature reading because it exists or near where the temperature is read?
No, I have an
Um,
inverted system on my Skybolt, and I think the inverted system just talks about where the supply comes from the engine back into the sump, how the sump
How it gets into the oil pump.
yeah, how it gets into the pump. So when you're level, straight and level, it's drawing oil from the bottom of the sump like normal airplanes. But when you're upside down, the bottom of the airplane becomes the top of the airplane, and it draws oil from the top of the engine to the. It's just changing the supply to the oil pump, like Mike said. You're still picking off the
Okay.
temperature after the cooler. The cooler is still getting, whether it's upright or upside down, the cooler is still getting oil from the same place. So that shouldn't have any effect.
And
Another quick recommendation, if you're not already doing it, is I'm a big fan of using cam guard to help inhibit corrosion on the cam.
yes, we're believers in the cam guard. We use it religiously.
Good.
The other question I had was to talk about getting the engine up to temperature, boil that water off. But at least to a certain extent, the engine is an enclosed volume, so boil all the water you want, but aren't you just making a pressure cooker, keeping the steam on the inside of the engine? How
No,
does
it's
that
going
moisture
out the
get
breather.
out of?
Well, but the
It goes out the
breather-
engine
Okay.
breather.
And the
Yep.
breather in this case it's a slobber pot for that. It's part of the inverted system. So there's an oil separator basically, and it sends the oil mist, and whatever oil doesn't, go back into the engine, sends it out the tail or out the exit.
What
of that.
did you call that? A slobber pot?
Yeah, that's what the aerobatics crew. They call it looks like a can, like a coffee can.
That sounds like something I would say. That was
Well,
not
it's
sophisticated
It's
at
called
all.
a slobber pot, and it's just a big air oil separator, and it includes any vapors coming out of the engine, so your water vapors exiting that way. And you'll often notice that the stuff that comes out of the slobber pot isn't pure oil. It's like gloppy. What's the
It's-
word when oil gets mashed in with water? It looks like snot.
It's awful stuff.
Yeah, it's
And,
awful.
and it's full of acids and stuff. It's really not the kind of thing you want to go back into the
slobber.
engine.
It's slobber.
It just sounds odd anytime Colleen says something like slobber pot, because
I could say worse
It
things.
sounds, I know, but it sounds like something that would be said in Tennessee, not in
Chris,
California.
Exactly.
Chris, that's what they call it, right? Have you heard that term?
I've not, but
Just-
I understand it because it's just putting foam in there, right? And just gurgling
Anyway.
foam, right?
It's nasty stuff, like Mike
It
said.
is.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you want it out, and that's what it does. It exits the airplane somewhere. So yeah, the airplane.
Okay. Other
the
than running an
is
engine
vented.
dryer.
Yeah, it's vented, so never fear. There's a place for those
And-
vapors.
yeah,
Okay.
and you'll see on a typical aircraft, you'll see a small puddle of that fluid on the hangar floor,
Mhm.
right below the vent tube,
Mhm.
after it's been sitting there a day or so.
A slobber
Okay.
puddle.
Well,
A
so
slobber pot.
Slobber pot.
Hey,
Yeah.
if you put an open bowl on the floor to catch all this stuff, could we call that a slobber pot? Not the same.
Don't put it back in the engine.
Don't put
Use
it
a
back in
cat's
the
jar.
engine.
Anyway, hopefully you can get those temps up a little bit.
all right. Well,
Check
thank
the
you. It sounds
vertiform.
like I just need to run more aluminum tape for now, and then test the Vernitherm when we get a chance.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't have cowl flaps or anything on the
Mm.
Decathlon, right?
No.
So you really
No.
can't modulate the cooling system at all, other
No.
than with blocking off the oil cooler and stuff.
Or fly sideways.
like fun. And Chris,
I would think flying inverted would do wonders for lubricating the cam, wouldn't it?
It would.
temporarily.
Maybe you could do
should.
that all
I
the
guess we
time.
Yeah, park it that way in the hangar.
Put some wheels on top.
And Chris, you did talk about the disparity in CHTs for your IO 360. I've got an IO 360 in my Cardinal, and I've always had a 60-degree spread. Number 3 for the Cardinal is the hottest, and
Yeah.
it's just so consistent, and it's all air cooling. It's just very difficult to get air through that back cylinder, through the fins there, and it will eventually affect the cylinder. The rings will start to stick or coke up or something like that, but it's not going to, it'll go for quite a while, but it is, it's not dangerous. It's just something that a lot of us live with. So
Yeah. My twin Comanche was that way on cylinder number 3 because that's where the air outlet was through the baffling for the oil
for the
cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
my
that's kind of a
Skybolt is
typical
done
Lycoming
before.
installation.
Yeah, so
Just as a sort of a general rule, the legacy aircraft that were designed before like 1990 tend to have very crude cooling systems, because the engineers just didn't have the ability to instrument things the way we can now. And if you compare it with a more modern design like the Cirrus or the Diamond or the Columbia, those airplanes have phenomenally good cooling systems, and the CHTs are often within 20 or 30 degrees of one another, and are significantly lower than they would be in a legacy airplane. I remember we did a study between Cessna 210s and Cirrus SR-22s, and the difference was just enormous. And
Yeah.
it just has to do with the, I fly a legacy airplane too, and I often think, oh, I could really improve this cooling system, but that's all a major alteration, and you just have to sort of say, "No, I'm just going to live with it." That's
Yeah.
the way
Just-
the airplane was designed.
Just run at Lena Peak. That cools it fine.
that helps. Yeah,
Yeah.
that does help.
Yeah, but he's got to heat up his
Yeah.
oil.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Man, every solution has a problem.
Yeah.
I even tried running
Yeah.
it, full throttle, 25 square for a long time in cruise. Didn't change anything.
It's airflow. Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what comes with the tape. Oh, and
Is the oil cooler
that's not an approved
remote mounted?
modification, so don't tell anybody.
What's that, Mike?
Is the oil cooler on the Decathlon remote mounted, or
Where is it?
It's right
I-
on top of the left side of the engine.
Yeah,
okay?
it's behind
Is
it,
on the
yeah.
left or the right side?
So there's not a duct that supplies air to it. It's
Is it just a hole in the baffling in the back?
Yeah, it's at the back of the
Of
whichever
cylinder
cylinder
four.
that is on the left side,
Yeah,
behind
that's
the
how the Skybolt
farthest
is
back
set
left
up.
cylinder.
Yep. So it makes cylinder
Interesting.
4 hot for
Yeah.
me in the Skybolt.
Okay.
This takes the cooling air away. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have
Good
fun.
question.
Do you
be nice
do
if
you
they
happen
could
to have a
put
question?
some kind of a
Do you
little
have
door in front of it that you could adjust from the cockpit.
Yeah. Well, you have that on the Columbia.
There are some people that have done that
Really?
on either decathlons or some of the other ones, and I don't know if the factory's doing it. Either a sliding door or a
Yeah.
open hinge door.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think it's approved for our plane. So,
Did you have another
would
question?
you
I
happen
know,
to have
great.
time for a quick little question?
It's up to Ian.
Well, we'll
If
see if
if it's
Ian
very
brings
quick,
his-
yes, sure, go ahead.
big-
Okay.
Blue
So we're getting a lot of kickback on startup now. A lot of times it does fine, but a lot of times we get a kickback of 3-bladed prop, 2 or 3 blades. Lately, sometimes dozens of blades will spin by, and it's like the engine's going backwards, and it's kind of scary. We have a new
Yep.
starter, new battery. The engine was
That's not the
rebuilt
problem.
2 years ago and has good
It sounds like
compressions.
timing.
No, it's
Sure fly.
magnetos.
Yeah.
Mag.
Yeah, mags.
It's either
Yeah, we
mag
have one
timing or it's
Surefly and
something
one
wrong with the
Bowman.
index.
Does your
Oh,
regular
are you
mag
starting
have
on? Are
impulse
you
coupling?
starting on the Surefly?
Pardon me?
Which one has the impulse coupling or the
Well, the
start?
Surefly doesn't have an impulse. It's
Well,
almost
yeah.
always used for starting.
Okay.
Does the other magneto have an impulse coupling?
Yes.
Yeah, you've got a problem with your impulse coupling more than likely. Because that magneto, instead of firing it near or after top dead center, is firing before top dead center, which it should not do during start. I have a feeling
Should I
that you're.
start?
I would pull the magneto
Pull
and
that
check
mag.
your impulse coupling. The counterweights that are in there are on little pivots and have springs. There's an airworthiness directive. I'm not 100% sure if it applies to your engine, but you should pull it off and check that, because that kickback can cause problems in the same magneto with the gears. There's a big plastic gear in there, and it can fracture those teeth. I would address that sooner than later.
Yep.
Hey, Paul,
Okay.
how does the Surefly work with starting? Does it just automatically retard below a certain RPM?
Yeah, so
In software?
it senses in software the RPM, and it fires. I don't know exactly when it fires. I'd have to ask Jason about that, but at Surefly, but it happens somewhere at or after top dead center until it gets to a certain RPM.
Mhm.
It's really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
Really
sounds
nice.
good.
It's one of the reasons I'm kind of looking forward to putting on
you
another Surefly and get rid of my other impulse coupling.
yeah,
on my
Chris,
airplane.
you can go to dual Sureflies now if you install a
Yeah.
backup battery on the firewall.
Yeah, we'll consider that. We
More
like the one we
money,
have.
Chris.
So
It's-
should we try to just start on just the Surefly as a
I
test?
don't know. That's an option. Oh, you have switches, don't you?
Yeah.
You don't? Yeah. Turn off the regular magneto
Oh,
and just
interesting.
start on the Surefly, and until
Okay.
you
See,
can
and
get
see
the
if
Until
other.
you
see if
fix it.
see if the kickback goes away, which it almost
Absolutely,
certainly
yeah.
will.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I
'Cause
hadn't
when-
thought it's been a long time since I've flown a decathlon and Citabria. I forgot you have actual toggle switches for your mags, which is
Which is
awesome.
a
Mhm.
lot better
Yeah.
than the key
key.
thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
when
Yeah,
we
simple
installed it,
troubleshooting.
yeah, when we installed that mag, I was wondering if it didn't make sense just to start on that. So I asked the question, someone at Surefly about that, and they said, no, just use your traditional, just leave them both mag switches on and just do like you always did before. You know, for
Well,
general, that was their answer. But for a
Well,
test, I think
and
that's
that's
the
true.
officially correct answer, but
Yeah. But in this case, if you're having kickback, there's a real high probability there's an impulse coupling issue, and you still don't want to ignore it.
No.
You still want to troubleshoot it. If it's stuck, it can stick in the other direction as well, which means the impulse coupling would be trying to fire or delay the spark as you're running the engine, which is not a terrible thing in terms of the engine running, but it's a terrible thing for the impulse coupling when it disintegrates. And you have what do they call it? Unscheduled rapid disassembly.
Oh.
We
oh,
don't
that's
want
the
that.
Elon Musk term,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah, when his
So-
rocket blows up,
So yeah,
Yeah.
troubleshoot it with the switches and then get
Right.
it fixed. If
and
you
then
get
find
it
that's
fixed.
the
yeah, fix
problem.
the impulse coupling.
Yeah.
Yep.
If that
Let's do that.
turns out what it is, which probably it does.
Sounds
the
like
end.
it.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate
Yeah.
that. It's nice to talk to all three of you.
Sure.
Good
Thanks,
questions,
Chris.
Thank
Chris.
you, Chris.
Good to have you on the show.
Take care.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Curtis, whose mechanic is telling him some alarming things about his ELT. Hey, Curtis,
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey.
what's up?
Okay, so, and actually, the mechanic in this case, I think is a strong advocate, great guy. He's independent. I guess starting, I was just coming into my first annual with a 1981 Mooney M20J. Pretty good airplane. I mean, the same mechanic who had done the pre-buy. So, into the annual, I had elected to do a few things. I replaced all 11 shock discs. That was a shocker for the
Yeah.
cost, and had the prop resealed and repainted and some other things. And so he informed me a few days into the annual, said, "Hey, your ELT battery is out of date." I said, "Great." He's like, "Unfortunately, it's a brand that I can't just replace the battery. I got to send it to a shop." So I'm out in the East Coast, Eastern North Carolina. So we sent it to a shop in the middle of the United States. I get a service invoice back with 3 options, none of which of them included replacing the battery. Of course, there's the lowest cost was a $180 evaluation fee. And then after that, it was, we can do some expensive repairs on your current ELT, but we really recommend you upgrade to this new ELT that's over $1,000. So he said my standby current tested high. There was a number of the value. I didn't recognize what units of value it was, but it said it tested high for 42.7 units high on the standby current.
Not amps. Oh.
Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
big battery.
So I did some digging on the forums, the Mooney forums, this and that. Apparently, it can test for high standby current when they disconnect the antenna and some other things. But long story short, I called the salesman. The salesman said, "Well, I can't deal with you. Your mechanic is the customer. I can only deal with him." And so then we get in like this 3-way triangle. I called the mechanic. He's like, "Yeah, I'll call him and tell him, you know." And So then the service manager or whatever we want to call him calls me back. He says, "So, well, I talked to your mechanic, and yeah, he authorized me to talk to you now, so it's okay." And I'm like, "Well, great, it's my airplane and it's my ELT." So,
Wow.
but it turned into a very like, well, out of good conscience and safety, I can't certify this ELT. It's it could be dead in 2 days after if I just replace. And then I caught him. He said, I've got it on the bench tester right now, and it's testing high at 87.2 gigawatts or whatever measurement of value they have. And I said, well, that's funny. The service invoice you have here says it was 42.7. So which is it? And he says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I said, I had another unit on my bench test. I was like, do all units that come in get tested for high standby current? I bet they all do, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of started, he's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'll do. I'll do all the repairs for you for free, just this one time.
So what brand ELT is this?
It's
a Canand.
Canad.
I have no experience
Canand.
with Canand.
I pulled a Colleen on this one. I actually
Oh no, you studied.
I looked it up.
Okay, so did I.
And it's a French unit.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And the manual is online.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of interesting that there's Curtis, there's two diametrically opposite answers.
Okay.
There's the answer if you feel like you have to follow the manual, and then there's the answer if you feel like you have to follow the regulations. And they come to very different answers. The manual says that battery replacement has to be done by a Part 145 avionics shop. The regs say that replacing a battery is a preventive maintenance item that an owner is allowed to do.
Owner can do. Absolutely.
Okay?
Right.
Yeah.
The manual does not have any airworthiness limitation section.
Right.
So everything in the manual from a regulatory standpoint is a mere suggestion. It is not a requirement. The only way it could be a requirement would be if there's an airworthiness limitation section in the manual, which there isn't, or if there's an AD, which I don't think there is either.
Right.
So you can feel free to blow off the manual, replace the battery yourself if you can get a replacement battery.
If you can find it, yeah.
Aircraft Spruce, the irony is Aircraft Spruce sells the battery kit. But
great.
Again,
so buy one and put it in and you're good to go.
Why did your mechanic decide he couldn't do this?
Well, it would invalidate the warranty if you do it yourself, I'm sure. That's typical. It's
Was
like
it
working
under
on it's like
warranty?
opening a Garmin radio.
It's not going to be under warranty.
Well, I
don't
wouldn't
know.
worry about the warranty. Yeah. But
long story short, in 5 years when I have to replace it, I'll probably just buy a new ELT.
there you go.
Get one that has
the
easier field replaceable batteries.
The salesperson was very clear. He said, now in 5 years, when you send it in for a replacement again and a test for high standby current, I'm not going to do this for you.
Ooh.
And I'm like,
Now,
well, the sales guy won't be there.
When you say the salesman, are you talking about a guy at the avionics shop?
At the service
yes. Mid-Continent.
Oh, the Mid-Continent. Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
They're a good shop.
Yeah, I mean, they're good guys, but they're going to follow the manual.
Sure.
They have to follow the manual. You don't have to follow the manual.
So I asked,
and it's your ELT.
I said, will you please just put a battery in it, period, and send it back. Just put the battery. I mean, he wouldn't do it.
He said he can't do that, but he can send you a battery, or you could buy it from Spruce, which is probably better.
Spruce, yeah.
And do it yourself, and you're perfectly legal. It's a preventive maintenance item.
See, Curtis knew he would get this answer from us. That's why he called us. He's like, I know who can tell me I'm okay here.
So in Mid-Continent's, not really in their defense, but in explanation, when I send a piece of equipment to a remote shop for repair, a radio, an engine, whatever it is, I am that shop's customer. They don't have any clue who you are. So if you call out of the clear blue and say, that's my ELT. I want you to do so-and-so.
Hmm.
It's totally appropriate for them to say, well, you are not my customer because you're not the one that sent it to me. You're not the one that's paying me to do this work. So I have to go check with my customer first before I know whether or not you are even somebody involved in this. He has no
Right.
way to know who that is.
Your name isn't on the invoice.
Your
It's
name is
Sure.
not on the
schematics, yeah.
invoice anywhere. So that was appropriate for them to do that. But
Okay.
everything after that is also appropriate. As a 145 repair station, they do have to follow that manual.
They're very
and,
regulated. Yep.
Yeah, they're very regulated.
Okay. So word of advice, just keep it in-house and don't even send it off next time.
Yeah.
You're still legal.
It never occurred to me to send an ELT off to have the batteries replaced.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
if it had stuff written in French on the side, I
Yeah.
might look at it a little differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the manual was in English, and it
Yeah.
was,
Mm-hmm.
and it did say that battery replacement has to be done by a Part
Part
145
145.
repair station.
I'm reading it.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Seems
It didn't
to-
say anything about standby current and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
that's probably something
But
that
that's not owner-facing information. That's
right.
Yeah. Well, very good. My last question: when, if it's appropriate to ask, when can we expect the audio version of Aircraft Ownership 1 or 2 to be
Oh,
out?
you're killing me. We're working hard.
Yeah, Aircraft Ownership 1.
It's
The
close.
audio is what, about 3/4 done.
I have 2 more parts, about 8 chapters to transcribe and send off to the
we're
reader,
making
and we're
we're
good
making
to go.
good progress on it.
I would say in February, probably it's going to the publisher. I don't know. There's like still process after we finish the recordings.
Yeah,
but
it's usually a couple weeks after
we're
we
close.
submit all the audio files before
I was
it
working
shows
across
up.
the holidays on it, Curtis. That's how close we are.
Very,
So
very exciting.
Yeah.
I'll save. I have so many other questions, but I'll save them for. I am a proud Savvy QA customer, and
cool.
Yeah.
took advantage of updating that. And even though I have a 20-year aviation career, I'm learning so much getting back into this. So.
Are you at Cherry Point?
Seymour Johnson.
Oh, Seymour
And-
Johnson. Oh, very cool.
And
Okay.
and now a 2-year airline pilot as well. So
Oh, awesome.
Cool.
You're a Mooney owner. Now a
Bouncing.
Mooney
Yeah.
owner. That's good.
Yeah.
First airplane?
My first, I swore I'd never do it because when I was a single engine CFI, right, I was like, this is stupid what all these people do. I was a poor CFI. I didn't understand how they made their way through life paying for these airplane bills because I got to see them. And I was like,
Yeah,
I will never
yeah.
do this. Here
Yeah.
I am.
Well,
And
there's
here
way to
you are.
Keep the cost down.
How did the 1981 Mooney wind up with a French ELT? That's what I want to know.
That doesn't make any
It's probably
sense.
I don't know.
Yeah, the previous owner is a very interesting guy. He's 79 years old. He was getting out of it, but he took very, very good care of the airplane. But I think he did do a good amount of work on it himself.
Mm-hmm.
But I understood him to be a very meticulous guy, so he kept
Changed all his own
everything.
ELT batteries, right?
He probably did. I probably should have asked him before I sent it off.
Well, as a QA client, you're probably going to get really cozy with Paul Cortopades, who's our
Yep.
Mooney expert
guru.
and a
Mhm.
personal friend, and knows everything about Mooney. So
Oh, great.
definitely feel free to email Paul. He will help you out.
I went through the whole. I had high number 3 EGT or CHT forever. I'm doing baffling everything. For the longest time, it was still at sometimes 40 degrees hotter, and if I didn't rapidly richen it or open cow flaps, it's going to shoot up above 390 to 400. So
And you fixed it?
I think it's finally. We're in the winter months now.
Yeah.
So that's
it
part
all
of
looks
this.
good. Yeah.
And now my number 3 and 4 just run 15 degrees colder than my 1 and 2.
Yeah, I was going through
close.
that with Paul a few months ago. Mooney changed the design of that baffling about 15 times. They just they kept tweaking it and kept tweaking it.
Yeah. My sister flew the first, was it 77 or 78 was the first year of the 201, the M20J. And my sister Janice flew it in the Air Race Classic in 1978. And of course,
Wow.
we didn't have any thought about CHTs. It had a gauge. and it had
Yeah.
green and then a little red spot. As long as it was in the green, it was good.
Hey, hey.
So my, the spark plug gasket probe and the piggyback. So my ELT or my probes appear to all be all four the same. And there's a piece of tape over my factory CHT.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a while I was wondering maybe my number 3 is high because it's either got a spark plug gasket probe in there. But
which engine monitor do you have?
JPI EDM 700.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's not quote legal as primary. So
Right.
you legally still need to have that factory CHT working.
Although I flew like that for years, Curtis. So. Just don't put the piece of tape over it. Just say, "Oh, it just broke on this last flight."
The only reason Colleen is telling you this is because the
'Cause it's a
statute of
long time ago.
limitations has run.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know lots of people that have
No,
done
well,
that.
so that's
but
what I've been talking to. I was like, I wonder if I need to remove the piece of tape or if it's even still hooked up. Can you have both an original JPI probe and the gasket probe still connected? Would they both still be there?
I think so.
Yeah, they have adapters, so
Yeah.
you can make that work. That one cylinder is going to read. It's going to be an outlier from the others because it's a different. Well, no, if you have gasket probes on all four.
No, he doesn't have gasket probes.
I thought you said you have gasket on just the one.
The probes are all four the same.
Where are they
They
mounted?
mounted on the spark plug, or they mounted on in the threaded well on the bottom of the cylinder?
It looks like it's the threaded well on the cylinder.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, even if the factory CHT even works. I'll
Probably
have to
not,
pull the
but
tape off and
It's
look.
probably been removed or something. So,
Well, if it reads 0, then it probably doesn't work.
Take the tape off and look.
Yeah, that should
But
be
you
working.
you can make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're telling these stories like that, it always starts with, I know a guy.
I know a guy.
I know
yes.
a friend. I have a friend. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just helping you out there for future reference.
Sure. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
The FAA
Thanks for
doesn't
the call,
listen to
Curtis.
this podcast, Curtis. We're
Thanks,
okay.
Curtis.
Yeah. No, it's an honor to talk to you guys. I appreciate what you guys are doing so much for those of us who've made their foray into aircraft ownership. Whether that's a wise decision or not, I don't know.
No, it is. You're gonna love
it's a terrible decision.
Well, we've survived it so far. So.
We have. Yeah.
No, it's a great decision.
It's a great decision, but it makes no sense at all. As most great decisions.
So enjoy the ride.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thanks, Curtis.
Take care, Curtis.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Okay, we got 2 great letters for this episode. The first deals with the test of the AOPA Baron and the 2 fuels. This is from Joe. He said, I just listened to the most recent pod 5 with the IO 520s. Mike had an idea to make a jig from some other valve covers. I wonder if it would be possible to drill a hole in the valve cover, thread it, and then have a removable plug in which to take the measurements from. This way you wouldn't have to remove the valve cover every time you wanted to take a measurement. Just a thought.
That's actually pretty cool. Unfortunately, the valve cover, because all those kind of thoughts went through my brain, the valve cover is not, there's not enough material there to do that accurately, to thread it. It's very thin.
And what's worse is
it's not the right angle.
We determined that you can't really take the measurement accurately with the rocker installed.
Right.
So the rocker's going to have to come off, which means the valve cover has to come off. When we started looking at this, our first thought was to let's see if we can do it without removing the rocker. And it just turned out not to be possible. There's not a flat measuring surface on the rocker that you could use. And
it's more the geometry than it is the material on the rocker.
Yeah, and the valve is at this strange angle, and the valve cover doesn't have any surface that matches that angle, so it would be a big deal. Yeah. But what I'm doing on the jig that I'm building is there'll be 3 holes. One will be in the center at the valve, and then there'll be 2 that will line up with the top of the valve springs, the cap, just for data points that we can make those measurements as well to find out if we can use those at some point in the future as a reference as well.
Mm.
I think that the valve stem is
You
the
mean
gold
measuring
standard.
to the rotator cap,
The rotator
the
cap,
rotocoil?
yeah, the top of the rotocoil. There is flat surface, but I don't know how repeatable that is. But that's the point of making those holes, is find out
Yeah.
if those are
Mhm.
repeatable spots.
Maybe you can use lasers, Paul, to get an accurate measurement.
Ooh,
Laser beams.
that's pretty awesome. Don't know where that tool is, but as soon as you find
if
it,
you want it.
send
Fryer
it.
valve.
Good.
Yep.
All right. So this is from Steve. He said, "Hey guys, I just wanted to chime in related to the Italian tune-up podcast. I've worked as a technician on Volvo cars for 20 years, and the term Italian tune-up is a well-known strategy to restore compression on mid to late 90s 5-cylinder motors that have developed excess carbon in the cylinders by way of running the car down the highway at 55 in second gear at 5,000 RPM for 15 minutes.
Oh, jeez.
He said this was even adopted for a short time from Volvo engineers, and every time it worked.
Ah.
That's
He
hilarious.
goes, I know it's not aviation really, but I thought I'd chime in. By the way, he said it would change the compression from about, he says, plus or minus 50 PSI all the way to 170. Worked every time.
Wow.
I like
Okay.
that idea. That sounds like fun.
So I'm going to make it aviation related here. We bought a new truck. This is decades ago, that we used here at the shop for recovering airplanes. And after well over 1,000 miles, it was just pumping oil. It was terrible. So Dad and Mom, which is an interesting thing, they went all the way to Colorado to pick up a 421, Cessna 421. And on the way back, Dad had just had enough with his oil consumption. So he puts the truck, it's a Ford F-350. He puts it in second gear. He manually put it in second gear and just pushed the pedal all the way to the floor and drove it from Colorado to Tennessee
Basically,
in
red line.
second gear at red line.
I must, with noise canceling headsets.
Oh my
in the
God.
I'm
cockpit.
telling you. Now, that truck
Wow.
now has over 170,000 miles. It's in Nashville. My son-in-law uses it to drive construction equipment around. It hasn't used a drop of oil since.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
I had the same experience with airplanes. I remember when my second airplane was a Blanca Super Viking that I bought. I bought it allegedly new, but it turned out that it wasn't exactly new. It had about 50 hours on it because they'd used it as a factory demonstrator.
Yeah.
And I got this airplane with 50 hours on it, and it was burning oil like crazy.
Oh, jeez.
And I didn't know anything. I was totally an appliance operator back then. I hadn't done any wrenching or anything. So I consulted with an old graybeard mechanic in Plainview, Texas.
Oh yeah, the Blanca capital.
And he said, go take that thing out over the Pacific Ocean, because he knew I lived in California, and run it up and down the coast at about 50 feet with everything to the firewall.
Mm-hmm.
And that was back before we had TCAs and all the lettered airspace and all the stuff you had to stay out of. So you could do stuff like that.
No birds or anything.
And never burned oil after that. And
cool.
Since then, I've rescued a couple of oil burning engines that way.
Yep.
Just running them real hard, but it just means the rings didn't seat right.
They like to run hard. My engines feel best at the max prop RPM.
That's why you race, right? It's just to make the engines feel better.
When I dial, when
no
I stop climbing out and I dial my prop back, it's like, it's not really as nice and smooth as it is when it's got lots of fuel, lots of RPM.
Of course, Dave takes it a little bit too far, but
tell Dave that.
I just did.
Okay.
Does Dave listen? Wait a minute.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. He's like, I hear these people talking all the time.
Yeah.
I had
people walk up to him and say, I heard that you, and he's like, what?
Right.
Are you talking about me again?
I had a guy call me, not a customer, but he called up, and he's a friend of a customer. He was 182 and had like 300 hours on this engine, and it was using a quart every 2 hours on a 182. And he said, and I broke it in just like I was supposed to. Well, back up all the way, and I found out the way he broke it in, they said to run it at 75%. Well, he was at 6,000 or 7,000 feet, so he ran it at high RPM and very low manifold pressure. I'm like, well, no, that's exactly backwards. And anyway, I said to your, I tried to get him to run it just like you said. We don't have any oceans around here, so we can't get quite that low.
Yeah, whenever I have somebody from Colorado, they say, "How can I break in my engine?" I say, "Fly to Kansas."
Fly to Kansas, yeah. So I tried to get him to do a low altitude deal, and he did, but I think it was too far gone after 200 and something hours. Oh well, it was worth a try.
It's expensive. Our next question is from Pierre-Louis, who is feeling the love from his new tuned exhaust. Go ahead, Pierre-Louis.
Hello, everybody. Thank you to take me on your show. It is a great pleasure for me, and I carefully listen to each of your podcasts. It's a great GA culture improvement every month. On our aircraft, it's a Jodel Ambassadeur. It's a French aircraft, a DR1050. We have a tuned exhaust system attached to our Continental O200A engine. It has an STC and is manufactured by Chabot in France. And we have been advertised that of 13% increase in the climb rate and 10% on the fuel consumption. We had a straight conventional exhaust system on our O200A before. And now, even if the climb rate improvement is difficult to measure as we didn't have proper measurements before, we can notice some fuel consumption reduction. But what we could directly notice, however, is that the engine was running like better balanced, and especially at low RPM. The audible feeling is that we now have a 6-cylinder engine under our cannoli. Now, as it sounds better, we have the feeling the endurance will be improved on our engine. Do we have some feedbacks of fatigue life on the engines with tuned exhaust systems in compared to the ones with straight exhaust systems?
I have an idea. So the tuned exhaust system gives you better performance and power increase, right? So more horsepower. So that means there's more, your cylinders are working harder, right? They're also working more efficiently, but they're working harder. So if anything, I would suspect a tuned exhaust would lower the lifetime of your engine because it's putting more stress on your engine.
I disagree.
I'm wondering if you get.
I stuck my neck out
you're
there.
getting more power because it's more efficient.
More efficient.
Not because it's working harder.
You're actually not getting more power. You're just getting the power to where you want it, which is at the propeller.
Really?
So rather than overcoming back pressure, which is really what the tuned exhaust is about.
So it's not.
That's why we had headers
with a poor exhaust system. The engine, part of the engine's power is being used to expel exhaust out of a restrictive exhaust system.
That's why we always wanted headers on our cars.
The same energy that might be used to spin a turbocharger if there was a turbocharger there. But I don't think that the cylinders are working any harder. If anything, they're working a little less hard because the exhaust system is cooperating with what they're trying to do, which is to get all that nasty stuff out of the cylinder at the end of the combustion event.
So it will increase the lifetime.
I don't know if it'll increase it. I think it's probably neutral. I don't think it will
vibration?
affect it.
Do you think he's got less vibration? Or
well, the vibration is going to be different because the exhaust pulses, in theory, all come out in sequence as opposed to coming out in jumbles. Yeah, exactly. So that's what makes it feel so much better. It's not going to, I don't think it's changing the rotational vibration at all, but it's certainly going to change the vibration of the engine. Anytime you can reduce vibration, smoothing it out in any way is better for everything on the airplane.
Including the pilot.
Including the pilot, sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah, I mean, we mostly had experience with the power flow system, and all the feedback that we have on the power flow system has been positive. I don't think there's any negatives really.
Cost.
Unless you do the power flow, the tuned this and the bigger piston that. And well, I remember we had one guy that had
Oh,
like
yeah.
5 or 6
Everything.
different changes to his engine.
Yeah.
It's like
That
we
can
didn't even
be-
know what to do with it.
That can be problematic.
Right, yeah.
Because if you apply multiple STCs, you're supposed to ensure that they are compatible with one another, and
Right.
there isn't any way to do that.
No way
That's
to do that.
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Now you make me want to get a tuned exhaust, Pierre-Louis, after all that good feedback.
In which of your 3 airplanes?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Your Legacy probably has a tuned exhaust of some
I think
sort.
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dave has flown with a tuned exhaust. I've thought about it on the Cardinal. PowerFlow has a close relationship with the Cardinal community, and they support the Cardinals, and I think they were one of the first STC holders for the Cardinal. It's just cost. I just haven't done it because I'm going to milk this exhaust for all it's worth.
It is an expensive upgrade. There's no doubt.
Yeah, but I've heard great things about it, so that's interesting. So I stand corrected. Very good.
Yeah, but I think the safe assumption is that it would have neutral effect on the engine as far as
longevity,
any kind of repetitive stress, fatigue. But if it's reducing vibration, it's probably good for a lot of things on the airplane.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for your answer.
Plus, the airplane sounds better and performs better. So, what's not to like about that? I have a feeling that the claims of 13% better climb and 10% better fuel are probably kind of optimistic. I wouldn't really expect to get that much out of it, but
they were even given, I think, 50 RPM increase at the run-up check, but we could not notice that. But however, you can. The better improvement was really for the sound and vibration that we can notice. And starting from that point, we had the doubt if it could, let's say, improve a little bit the engine lifetime. But as you said, should not be worse. Probably in the good direction.
Yeah,
definitely worth.
Good. Well, great question. I'm sure a lot of people are listening closely to this one. Tuned exhaust. So
thank you very much.
Thank you for calling, Pierre-Louis. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Our next question is from Frank, who wants his airplane to stop acting like an old Volvo. Is this back to that? What was it? What is that? An Italian overhaul that we talked about?
Italian tune-up.
Italian tune-up.
Hey guys, I enjoy your show every week, and when I listen to you when I work on the Yorktown ship here in Charleston.
Oh,
wow!
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. I fly out of Mount Pleasant Airport, and we have a very active aviation community here.
We get to meet the coolest people.
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
that where Bruce Landsberg is based?
Yeah, I know Bruce is a friend of mine. Yes, sir.
Oh, very
cool.
good.
Wow.
Yep, he educates us once in a while, so we enjoy having Bruce. And he just retired from the NTSB.
Yeah.
So we'll see more of him now.
Wow.
So that's good. He'll get to fly more, and I get to fly.
He didn't get to commute up there to Washington. He never.
No, I don't think he's missing that at all. Yeah, my question is, I bought a Rockwell 112 TC back in 1992, so I've been a long time owner.
Wow.
And I've had this occasional problem. As you know, it's a carbureted turbocharged engine. When I shut down, it's only in the summer when it's about over 90 degrees out, I start having problems with the engine dieseling, where I cut the fuel mixture off and it keeps running, and I've turned it off with the key. I was wondering if that's not a bad way to do it, but I looked up as much as I could on it, and I got a lot of different thoughts on why it's doing that. And I was wondering what your thoughts would be.
I think there's only one way it possibly can be doing that, and that's if the mixture valve in the carburetor is not shutting off the fuel flow completely.
Okay.
Do you
So
agree,
how-
Paul?
Yeah, if there's no fuel, there's no run on. It has to have fuel.
Now, I looked this up on the internet because I'm not an engine geek, and it said dieseling can occur if you have a buildup of carbon in the ignition chamber that's
No
glowing after
way.
the engine's off.
Well, but
It doesn't. You could glow all you want, but if there's no fuel to ignite, nothing's going to
Well,
happen.
Okay.
right, but the run on that you're looking at, Colleen, is like from automotive engines.
Yeah, I'm sure that was an
Right,
automotive.
right.
Yeah.
response.
In automotive engines, you shut them off by turning off the ignition system, and
Okay.
Yeah.
you're not shutting the
So-
fuel off.
So
But I
if
think I
Frank
heard-
turns off the key,
Yeah.
the engine will die. Typically.
Oh, okay.
And
got
that's
it.
what he said.
Okay,
He
we
turns
have
it
a
off.
protection
He
against
turns
that,
off
yeah.
the mags.
Got it.
So his is running on because
this
it
has
still
to be
gets
an issue
fuel.
in the carburetor, in
Yep.
the mixture control valve in the carburetor. So I think the first thing you need to check before you get expensive is the
Yeah.
rigging of the mixture control, and to make sure that when you're pulling the
Okay.
mixture to idle cutoff, it's actually going all the way to the stop on the carburetor
stop.
end.
Mhm.
Yep.
Could
And
it be a
if it
leaking-
is, and you're still having this problem, then you're probably going to have to send in the carburetor.
Could it be a leaking primer?
Ooh,
That's
that's
a
good.
possibility.
I
Yeah.
got a good
Yes.
idea. Yeah.
That's
There you go,
yeah.
Elaine.
Good
Always
job.
thinking.
I don't fly a primered airplane, but I've heard of that causing problems.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that is
Yep.
definitely
Anything
a
that
possibility.
lets fuel into the combustion chamber after you've shut it off.
Absolutely right.
Okay. Oh,
That's
okay.
that's an easy first place
And
to
that's
start.
O-rings, yeah.
Yep.
How else would he see a leaking primer? Running too rich sometimes?
Well, a leaking primer can do a lot of weird things, and the way you find out what it'll do is unlock your primer while the engine's running,
Yeah.
and you will find out what your engine will do, because some engines have primer injectors on all the cylinders, some have only on a few.
Mhm.
Sometimes it'll suck air into the cylinders, which will make them run lean,
Lean.
and other times it'll make the cylinders run very, very rich.
Yeah, mine is electric and it goes into 1, 2, and 3 cylinders, but it's
Oh, it's electric.
primer.
You know,
That's
Yes, sir.
interesting. Yeah.
Oh, well
Is that
then
like a
it's
boost
not
pump
just
That's not likely, but
a matter of changing O-rings or something.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Okay.
Okay.
but what you could do is just cap all those off at the cylinder.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't. It only happens in the summer and only after a flight, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so-
I just flew it this morning and shut
Hmm.
right down.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's going to be hard to troubleshoot this with a strong feeling that you've resolved it,
Until
because you
summer.
won't know if you resolved it or if it was just one of those days where it wasn't going to be running on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're looking for fuel, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I've been writing all this down.
Maybe you could
Me
take
too.
the lines off the injectors and
Mhm.
put a small vacuum on those, and see if you get any fuel sucked through the primer.
Mhm.
Not
I
the
wouldn't have any.
injectors for the priming system.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have any clue how to do that. It's just first thought that hit my mind as a way
Yeah.
to test that part of the system.
Yeah, I'll run it by my mechanic here.
Hmm.
A sunk
He
float.
he had thought it was something in the carburetor, just like Mike had said,
Mhm.
Yeah.
that it must be still getting fuel. But
Would that
I
require
thought it was
carb?
just curious that it didn't do it in the winter when it's cold here. It's and when it's 50 degrees here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rub that in.
That's, yeah, we have 2 seasons in Charleston, hot and hotter. That's it.
Why is this happen in the summer when it's hotter? What's going on? Why would it run on after shutdown only in the summer?
Crickets.
Deafening
Mm.
silence, right?
I mean, it's obvious. It's a very marked observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has something to do with air density, how much fuel is getting in versus how much air is there
So
due to the
in
density.
the winter when you've got, I don't know.
Much drier.
The fuel air mixture is
more
allowing
air.
combustion in the summer,
Yeah,
where it's not allowing
yeah.
combustion in the winter, I guess. Interesting.
This is wild speculation mode. I can see.
Yes. We've gone off the rails. The value of any answers after this point are
So,
very questionable.
But the fix, if it is the carb and it's allowing fuel into the combustion chamber, is the fix to remove the carb and replace seals? That's the expensive?
If it's the carburetor.
Okay, so we're hoping maybe.
So we need
carburetor.
to troubleshoot it and to fault isolate it. So the easiest way to fault isolate it is to disconnect the primer.
Yeah. I think the primer is the first place to go.
You probably disconnect the tube at the outlet of the electric priming pump and cap it.
The one tube, yeah.
And then see if the problem goes away. But you have to wait till the summer to do
or just
it.
look and see if it's leaking. I mean,
could you pull a breaker on the primer? I mean, just not use it? Is it?
Well, it's not
probably not
being
that.
operating.
It's the point is that somehow, I don't know the construction of this pump, but it's supposed to not pass fuel when it's not running.
Got it.
I think just disconnecting the line out at the engine and letting it sit there for a bit and see if any fuel drips out of it, that would tell you right off the bat.
Well, if the engine weren't running,
but it might not drip out of it, Paul, but because the engine is trying to suck it out.
Well, that's what I was saying. Apply a suction. That's why I was talking about applying a light suction to the lines and see.
Got it. Yeah. Just put it in your mouth on it and you'll know really quickly if it worked. No, don't do that.
Yeah, that's nasty.
Interesting though. Boy, that's a long time to own a Commander. That's a great airplane.
Yeah, it is.
I've never flown in one.
It's done its missions well. When I was younger and I flew a lot of trips, flew up and down the East Coast, and I put time on it then. And now I'm not flying those long trips anymore. But it's a good plane to just go up and sightsee.
Yeah.
And the TO360 is not a common engine. I think
it's not.
And the Rockwells also make you look good when you land, because even a hard landing is a nice soft landing.
It's got a trailing landing
gear. Yes, just like Mike's 310.
Yeah, and big.
No, I don't have a trailing
you don't have it?
gear. No.
The L39.
421s have it.
Yeah, we have a 114B here that we just took care of for a longtime friend, and it's they are sweet airplanes to fly.
Yeah,
not real fast. They look really fast. They look really fast.
114 has a 540 in it, right?
Yeah, 260 horse.
Yeah.
Isn't it great when you've owned an airplane that long? It's almost like having an old dog. I mean, it's just life is good.
In the best way.
In a good way. I mean, I love it. Yeah, that's wonderful. It's like
the old dogs get mobility problems. I hope the airplane doesn't do that.
Well, it's got a little age on it because it's a 76 model. So, it's had its age-related issues.
But that was the heyday of general aviation.
That's true.
The 70s.
Yeah.
They were pumping those airplanes out the door like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I bought this one from my father. So he bought it when he retired from TWA. And then he had some medical issues, so I bought it from him. So it's been in the family since 1978.
Very nice.
That's cool.
I'm hoping my great nephew, he's got some interest in flying, and I'm hoping he will learn to fly, and I'll let him inherit it.
That's cool.
Very nice.
And then he can pay the bills.
And then he can pay the bills.
He can fix the carburetor.
And I can still fly it.
Thought you loved this guy.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow. Well, great question. I learned something.
Right.
I got corrected.
Yep. I appreciate y'all and enjoy the show well, you're on every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
What are you now?
Yeah.
2 weeks? Yeah. Yeah. So I listen to them about once a week when I'll get half of one in, and then the next week I'll finish it. But it's really, really nice show.
Thank you.
Very good. We appreciate it, Frank.
Yeah, we have
All
fun.
right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the call.
Happy New Year.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's the end to another episode. Hopefully we got a couple things right this time. Let us know and keep sending us your tricky questions. You can email them to podcasts@aopa.org.
See you next month.
Bye.